The Flash is actually good. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania apparently is bad, and Ted Lasso is finally coming back. Talking all this and more on the Chatter After Daily. Happy Valentine's Day. Greetings to everyone. This is the Chatter After Daily, where we're talking all things in the world of movie news and pop culture. I'm Mike. Joining me, of course, is my co-host Ryan Cam. How you doing, Ryan?
I'm doing fantastic, Mike. It's great to be back. Super Bowl is officially in the rear view. I have some friends who are Eagles fans who are deep in mourning, so just giving them their time to process. But congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs. Not really super big into football, but I did watch the game, and it was a very entertaining game, very back and forth. Yeah. Whoever wrote the script this year clearly deserves a raise.
I know, right? Like that, it came down to the wire, last play of the game. So good job, writers. You made sure the Chiefs still won throughout all of the tension of that football game. Well done. Also, I'm sorry to all the Eagles fans. It's a tough way to go out, but it yielded some great trailers for the Super Bowl. I think we're going to talk about the first big one. Is a good place to start. First off, hey, Isaac. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully the night shift isn't too bad over there in Sweden. We appreciate you stopping by. The Flash. It might be good. That trailer, if you guys missed it, Brandon and I spent an hour discussing that trailer because he's probably the biggest Flash fan alive. So that we got into the minute details of all of that. But I want your thoughts on this, Ryan. This is our first real look at the Flash. What were your initial thoughts?
So I don't know how hot of a take this is going to be, and I have thought about this for a while now, but these are my guns and I'm going to stick to them. I wasn't a huge fan of this one, and for the only reason that, I mean, yes, the Ezra Miller stuff, I mean, that's baked into the cake at this point. You got to acknowledge it, and I believe that everyone with any sort of clout has, so there that is. But even if you put that aside, which I know is hard, but put that to the side, I watched this a couple of times, and I thought it was, like, at best, them trying to do what No Way Home did, and at worst was just, here's a bunch of references for 2.5 hours, which is what we got with stuff like Rise of Skywalker, and I hated it. Now, I'm leaving the door open for me to like this. I'm not killing the idea of the movie in my head. It's nice to see Michael Keaton back. It's nice that they gave Ben Affleck a job because clearly he was slumming it at the Dunkin' Donuts and he needed the work. So I'm glad that Walter Hamada in one of his final acts gave Ben Affleck he threw him a bone. So good on him for that.
Right.
I don't know. I just from what I've seen, I feel like and I haven't read every Flash story, but I feel like there's so much that can be done with this character. Just from watching like 3 seasons of the Flash TV show on the CW, which I know is not the best example to use, but that's like the biggest thing Flash related in current pop culture right now. So I have to pull from that and that alone.
Right.
So just to put the period at the end of the sentence, wasn't as impressed as like 99% of everyone else. However, I'm leaving a small kernel of hope that I could be surprised.
That's fair. That's totally fair. So going through this trailer, the reason that I enjoyed it is because as a fan of DC Comics, this is just Flashpoint, essentially. Now, to be fair, to your credit, that is very much what Spider-Man kind of did in No Way Home. Like, they did essentially tell a Flash-like story for the character of Spider-Man, which inherently is kind of weird in the first place, but that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah.
That I totally get where you're coming from because it feels too late. Much like a lot of the things DC does, it might just be 3 years too late. Like if this movie came out in 2017 or whenever it was originally supposed to actually come out, you might feel differently seeing this trailer. But yeah, that's totally a valid take. I think for me, I've had so many reservations about this movie, to the point where I'm still not going to see it in theaters. I honestly don't think I care enough, but it looks entertaining, and I think to me that's the biggest thing. Like you said, Ben Affleck being in this movie, seeing General Zod, seeing Supergirl, all of those things have me interested, and that I think though is still inherently a problem where the movie is called The Flash. It's about the Flash, but he's the thing I care the least about, mainly because of Ezra Miller. And that I think will just forever dampen my excitement for this. Like if anybody else, like if this was actually Grant Gustin, for example, right? Just throwing a random name out there. If this was Grant Gustin getting this opportunity to bring the Flash to the big screen, I would feel completely different about this film. But yeah, it's really hinging on this guy, Michael Keaton, to get butts in seats. And it might work, it might not. We'll see. I do think it looks fun at the very least. I'm not quite sure, if it's going to be peak cinema like the Dark Knight trilogy or anything, but it looks like a fun time. We did get a synopsis that I think it's worth checking out because Brandon and I talked for almost an hour and a half last night and didn't read the freaking synopsis, so I think it's worth covering here. Okay, this is coming officially from DC Entertainment. Worlds collide in The Flash when Barry uses his superpowers to travel back in time in order to change the events of the past. But when his attempt to save his family inadvertently alters the future, Barry becomes trapped in a reality in which General Zod has returned, threatening annihilation, and there are no superheroes to turn to. That is, unless Barry can coax a very different Batman out of retirement and rescue an imprisoned Kryptonian, albeit not the one he's looking for. Ultimately, to save the world that he is in and return to the future that he knows, Barry's only hope is to race for his life. But will making the ultimate sacrifice be enough to reset the universe? We're going to have to find out. That to me is just a fascinating plot summary because that ending line, right? Sacrifice himself. Is that DC's way of having a loophole on why Ezra Miller will not return to this role? Like maybe the actor changes or Barry dies and we get Wally West or something. Like, how are you feeling about that?
I mean, if you're going to do a close one door, open another in the DC universe with James Gunn, the once and future king, I mean, what better way to do it than with a Flashpoint style storyline, just cutting off what was and moving on to the what is. I feel like if that is what they're going to do, I feel like that is about as smart a move as you could ask for this series. And
Yeah.
one more thing that I did forget to mention. Nice to see Michael Shannon back. I am a fan of him as an actor, but
Yes.
it's so weird seeing him going to be act against someone that's not Henry Cavill in the role, which is going to be, I'm not going to say it's going to be the biggest elephant in the room because the elephant in the room is Ezra Miller, but it's going to be a similarly sized but smaller elephant because it's just DCU has just been the very definition of a hot mess, but that's been discussed by up, down, left, right, and center. So
Right.
I feel like if they're going to end things and start anew, I think the Flash is their biggest shot to do so.
Agreed. Isaac in the chat says, hot take, Grant Gustin can't act at all. That's just factually wrong. I'm sorry.
Yeah, respectfully disagree. I people crap on the CW, but honestly, like Prime Arrow and Prime Flash is really good.
Yeah.
Like the stuff in season 2 of Arrow with Arrow against the dude.
One thing to
That stroke.
Yep.
Him. That was great.
Great stuff. So one thing to keep in mind, everybody, when viewing the CW, and this is like just a production note, things to think about. They only have like a week to film that entire episode. So like Grant Gustin doesn't get multiple takes. He only gets like maybe 1 or 2 takes to get his lines down. So if you're criticizing the acting in those shows, keep in mind that they're really just kind of one-shotting it as they go along for 90% of this stuff that you're seeing. Just to kind of put in perspective the work schedule of the CW and how all of those shows work. That's why they're also very rushed, and sometimes the quality's not that great because they're going through it so fast. But I digress. The next topic, and I don't know how to feel about this. We have Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. Now, I haven't seen it. I don't know if you had a chance to get a screener at all, Ryan. No? Okay.
No.
Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania reviews are in, and they're not looking great. It is currently at a, what did we say, a 54%?
54. Yeah, 54.
54% on Rotten Tomatoes. And this is the consensus from the critics over at Rotten Tomatoes. Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania mostly lacks the spark of fun that elevated earlier adventures. But Jonathan Majors' Kang is a thrilling villain poised to alter the course of the MCU. I don't have a ton of quotes here from different critics and the like, but this movie, like, no matter who you listen to, it's really hard for them to spin it as good. Like, they try and find positives, but it seems like they're grasping at straws a lot. And again, speaking as someone who hasn't seen this movie, I can't give a comment on the film's quality, but it's not looking good, Ryan. It's not looking good.
Yeah, and considering the fact that most of the trailers I've seen for this have been pretty solid, so that's especially not a good sign, because it's that curse of the trailer is a lot better than better than the movie itself. Insert an image of the Prometheus poster here. But I defend the Ant-Man movies quite a bit, and I believe we did talk about this when the last trailer dropped. I defend these movies quite a bit because they are fun. They're essentially let me up movies in the MCU. I don't think it was a coincidence that the first Ant-Man came after Age of Ultron, this big near world-ending event, and then Quantumania, or not Quantumania, but Ant-Man and the Wasp, just them, no Quantumania, came after Infinity War, which was actually a world-ending event. And it was a nice burst of something different. Not taking anything away from what had just happened, but just a nice change in direction. Not sudden, but a nice veering off of the highway for a bit and taking a bit of a side road. And from what it sounds like from this consensus, it feels like they're trying to go in a more serious route with Ant-Man, which, I mean, for a dude who can control ants and can shrink to this big or even bigger than what I'm showing here on screen for the YouTube version, is I sincerely hope that they are not trying to make Ant-Man gritty or something, because I haven't read too much Ant-Man in the comics side of things, but Ant-Man does not seem like the kind of person who fits the gritty persuasion. He's fun. He's meant to do fun heists, and it feels especially tough because this is the quantum realm, and just looking at this footage here, this looks like out of bounds and bonkers, and I feel like they're just going to be, according to this, it's just like they're going to be brooding, and it's going to suck, and I hope that doesn't happen.
Right. Yeah, I'm totally with you there. Like, every trailer for this movie looks like it's fun, and it looks like it's a good time, and it's just boggles my mind that this film is getting the reception that it's gotten. Now, again, I haven't seen it. I can't speak to the critics' opinions going into this, but it's just a real shame. It's a bummer because I was really excited to see this film this weekend when it comes out, and I'm still going to watch it, but hype has definitely dwindled. But this kind of leads me to another question for you. We have a quote coming from Collider. Kevin Feige spoke with the press, and they were talking about the longevity of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He says, quote, "It's like when people go to the comic shops. There's Spider-Man and the Avengers and the big titles, the big ones. And sometimes you pick up a one-off or an experiment from an artist or a writer that you're a fan of. That's why comics have been around for 80 plus years. And I want Marvel Studios to be around that long, if not longer. So we have to continue to do different types of things. We've talked at nauseum, not here on the show, but just in general, about the Marvel formula and our superhero films dying or cinema dying and like all these conversations. In phase 4, now in phase 5 with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, we have probably the roughest stretch that the Marvel universe has seen, like reception wise, right? We've had Eternals, which got really poor reception and reviews when that came out. We have shows getting review bombed, like Miss Marvel. We've got Ant and the Wasp getting mediocre reception from critics. We'll see if audiences respond differently. But there have been some gems. There's been No Way Home. There's been Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. You know, there's WandaVision, critically acclaimed. Where does Marvel go from here? Like, does it go? Do you see it lasting another 10 years? Do you think eventually we're going to see this taper off? Because it seems like phase 4 and 5 have not been great since Endgame.
That is very true, and I've been vocal. While I haven't seen everything in phase 4, I freely admit that. I think phase 4 was just the weakest phase in general. I mean, after Endgame, where do you go from there? So it's just, and I feel like they did a good job of showing the heroes that they had left and them responding to what happened in about the best way possible. I feel like there was an admirable effort to try and do something that didn't betray the character while also trying to stay in line with what was going on. I feel like it was an admirable attempt. But this phase 4 was definitely the most up and down because I was not a big fan of Eternals. I didn't hate it. I thought it was just okay. I didn't see Miss Marvel or any of the other ones or She-Hulk because I saw the terrible reviews and it was in a stretch where I just had limited time, so I didn't get around to it. I'm sure I will one day, but it came and went for me. But, you know, I remember, and I can't remember what video I saw this from. It was a video on the American Western, and I can't remember who the creator was or what it was about, but it was a big overview on the American Western from its inception to where it got to where it just declined to where it is now, where we get like one or two every couple of years, but just to the point of the Western being like, when you think of Western being like the Dollars films or something like that. Like great in their time, but there hasn't been a truly great Western in a while now. But just thinking, and I remember this quote definitively in the height of the spaghetti Western era, where it was Sergio Leone and Sergio Carpucci and all of these other Westerns like Sartana and Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and all of that. In Italy alone, there were over 600 spaghetti Westerns made. And I used to know the exact figure, but it was over 600. The number was high. And this was in less of a period of time that Marvel Studios has been around. So I take the doomsday reports of Marvel Studios with a grain of salt. I believe that Kevin Feige still is the best choice to helm the studio. I mean, he's gotten them this far. So right. That's not to say that he can't take him another 10 years. But I feel like stagnation and a bit of flavor fatigue is beginning to set in. And I feel like there might be a shakeup coming. So I am optimistic for the future. However, I'm also kind of seeing the lay of the land and thinking to myself, I think they might be running out of ideas just a bit.
Yeah, that's the feeling I get too. Because when Kevin says again in this quote, he wants them to be around for 80 plus years, so we're going to have to try different things, which is good. At least they're aware that they're going to have to evolve and change over time. They can't do what they did in 2012 with the Avengers, right? In 2023, I appreciate that. I just wonder again, like the character of Ant-Man. Quantumania might just be too big for what that character is supposed to be. Like what you were saying at the top of the conversation, Ant-Man was always that refreshing take, right? Where we have these big event films and then we have a heist movie. But by introducing the big bad of this arc, this multiverse saga, with Kang the Conqueror, fighting Ant-Man just doesn't feel like that's a natural progression of Ant-Man's story. So I feel like they're a little bit lost. And that's why moving forward to the other Super Bowl trailer we got, Guardians of the Galaxy, I'm really going to miss James Gunn in the Marvel Universe because every concern that I have with Ant-Man, I don't have with Guardians. Because like Gunn has built a franchise within the Marvel machine that's full of heart, that's full of humor, that works within this system that Kevin Feige has built, but they still offer unique takes, fun characters, and everything that makes a movie, a superhero movie, entertaining. I love this trailer. Do you have any like thoughts on Guardians or moving forward with that?
I really enjoyed this trailer, and I just had a thought. The Guardians films are outside of the Captain America films and the Avengers films. My favorite, actually, scratch the Avengers ones. The Guardians films are my favorite standalone MCU films outside of the Captain America ones, because the Captain America trilogy, First Avenger, Winter Soldier, and Civil War, are just an example of good, better, best. And it's looking like, because I thought Guardians of the Galaxy 1 was very good indeed. It was a lot of fun. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 was better. And then hopefully, and it's looking like from this trailer, I hope Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is the best. I'm certainly hoping to hear some good songs on the soundtrack, because like that type of music I grew up with. So at the very least, I'm hoping for some good songs.
Yeah, for sure. I'm very excited for this film. And again, that's why my entire like notion that Marvel is in a little bit of trouble is that nothing announced gets me as excited as Guardians of the Galaxy 3. And that's why the notion of Marvel probably should have taken a break after Endgame and remap and recalibrate what this universe is going to be, because outside of Spider-Man and the Guardians, there's no Iron Man in this franchise anymore. There's no Captain America. Those tentpole characters, right? That you look and you say, I'm watching this movie for that character. Now we kind of look and say we're watching it because we've watched all the Marvel movies up to this point. And I want to go back to something you said earlier about how you haven't watched Miss Marvel or She-Hulk yet. That in and of itself is kind of a problem, right? Because I'm sure in phases 1 through 3, you watched everything.
I did, because it was all contained. And I mean, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but that was outside of the main story. So if you skipped it, you would have been fine. You would have never known that Ghost Rider is in the MCU secretly, but he is there. But it wasn't required viewing. I feel like with Phase 4, you had to have seen all the Disney Plus shows, plus all the movies. It felt like homework at a certain point. And I'm not an MCU hater. I'm not one of those that like MCU is killing movies. No, I'm not one of those people. I promise you, I am not. But at a certain point, like I said, going back to my idea on flavor fatigue, in my 10 favorite movies of 2022, not a single Marvel one was in there. It was all either something outside of Marvel or it was an original thing. And it's not. And to me, good movie is a good movie. It doesn't matter if it's a big studio or if it's like A24 or like a really small thing. If it's good, then I'm going to champion it. One of my favorite movies of 2018 was Avengers Infinity War. Yes, it was a big studio film, but it was Avengers Infinity War. Let's think about that for a second. So if it's good, I will champion it. But if it's not, then I'm going to skip it. And I feel like with Phase 4, it just was like, you have to watch this and this and this and this and this. And you're just like, stop. I need a break. We can't take it anymore.
Yeah, I feel like Kevin is right that Marvel Studios can exist for another 80 years. I mean, Disney has evolved to the point where they're still financially successful, and they're in year 100 right now, you know?
Yeah.
I think the only major glaring flaw is what you just said. They might end up killing themselves just because of content overload. They might need to scale it back a bit. I want to address Isaac in the chat. He says, I'm with Ryan. I'm not as interested to watch the MCU after Endgame. Yeah, because that felt like the ending of a show. And Spider-Man had the benefit of feeling like an epilogue to that show.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
These other ones don't feel like Shang-Chi, Doctor Strange 2, those should have felt like the beginning of a new book, or in comic book terms, right? The beginning of a new run. A new artist, a new writer has taken on the franchise, and we're going to see it go in a completely different direction. Instead, it kind of feels like they're just going through the motions a bit. So hopefully Guardians doesn't feel that way. Unfortunately, it seems like, according to most people, Ant-Man doesn't really change the tides too much. Last topic of the day, though, is a fun one. Ted Lasso. We got a teaser trailer for season 3, and it's so simple, but I love it so much. We just got to believe. This is the last season of Ted Lasso, for those who are not aware. It is going to premiere March 15th. How excited are you for more Ted Lasso, Ryan?
So I have watched part of season 1 and I have enjoyed it. I just time got away from me, but from what I have seen, I have greatly enjoyed it. Jason Sudeikis was someone who I wasn't crazy about before this show, but after this show, like, his stock has just risen tremendously to the point where Apple TV Plus is low key the best streaming service going right now, or at least one of the best. They don't do much, but what they do is usually pretty solid, and it really begins and ends. It really begins and ends with Ted Lasso, and I am sad that this is the final season, but I am glad that they have recognized this is all the story that we can tell, and not going like 5-6 seasons and just feel like the wheels are spinning, but the rubber left the road a long time ago. So it will be sad to see it go, but I will love to watch it leave.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% there. Give me 1 second. Isaac, I took the time to Google because this statement is ridiculous. One Piece is going to take the average person 16 days. It's going to take them 16 days with zero sleep, with zero breaks, to try and catch up. The Marvel Cinematic Universe, you can watch the entire thing in 2 days. It still does not compare. Again, with no sleep, it's going to take a lot to watch the Marvel movies. It's going to take even longer to watch One Piece, but that is a lot of hours, man. Hundreds of hours to get through One Piece, less than 50 to get through the MCU. That does not apply in this case. Back to Ted Lasso, though. We do have the synopsis. It's a thick one, so bear with me as I try and read this entire thing. I'm going to pull up the footage again of the trailer. You can look at that while I read through this. All right. This is coming from The Hollywood Reporter. The newly promoted AFC Richmond faces ridicule as media predictions widely peg them as the last in the Premier League. Nate, now hailed as the Wonder Kid, has gone to work for Rupert at West Ham United. In the wake of Nate's contentious departure from Richmond, Roy Kent steps up as assistant coach alongside Beard. Meanwhile, as Ted deals with the pressures at work, he continues to wrestle with his own personal issues back home. Rebecca is focused on defeating Rupert, and Keely navigates being the boss of her own PR agency. Things seem to be falling apart, both on and off the pitch, but Ted Lasso and his team are set to give it their best shot. Again, this is the final season of Ted Lasso, according to the showrunner. This was an interview, again, with The Hollywood Reporter. Going back last year, he said, quote, this is Bill Lawrence. He says, quote, this story is going to be over in season 3. Regardless if there's new stories, regardless on if it finds another story to tell and goes on. So there's potential that Ted Lasso will get a spinoff or a continuation in some form, but Ted Lasso itself is ending this season, mainly because Jason Sudeikis just can't continue working in the UK half the year, and It's kind of stressing the family life a bit, which is totally understandable. Whatever's best for Jason, that's what we want. But yeah, this just sounds more of what we want from Ted Lasso. I hope you get caught up. I hope you enjoy it because season 2 is fantastic. So if you're making your way through season 1, I think you're going to really dig the next season of the show. Was there any other stories or topics you wanted to discuss before we call this an episode, Ryan?
I think that is everything. However, I don't know if we do a Thursday show, we'll bring this up, but I wanted to spotlight the Marlowe movie that's coming out, and it's unfortunately getting a bit of a death spot because it is going up against Ant-Man, and everyone with a pulse is probably going to see Ant-Man if given the choice. But I am going to go see Marlowe, and I hope to get a review up for it because I saw the trailer and it looks really good with a really good cast. So I like I said, I am going to see it, and I hope when I do my review, I'm going to give it a really positive one because I feel like I kind of feel sorry for it. It was like when Winnie the Pooh went up against Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. It was like, you didn't have to do that, Disney. Why did you do that?
Yeah, it's very unfortunate for Marlowe getting, like you said, that doom spot. Especially Disney has just been owning the theaters, going from Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, to Avatar: The Way of Water, and now Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. They have just dominated like the last 5 months at the theater. So fortunately, some of these smaller films get crushed under the weight of all of that. But hopefully they carve their own little space, kind of like how Sonic the Hedgehog was able to continuously go up against blockbusters and do well. Same thing with Puss in Boots too. Puss in Boots did very well compared to or going up against Avatar.
Yeah.
That is our show. Guys, if you enjoyed this live stream, make sure you give us a like and subscribe here on YouTube and follow us on Twitch if you're watching us there. We had an awesome time. If you're in the podcast feed, leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. That helps us rank up in search. We greatly appreciate that. Ryan, thank you so much for joining me. What you got coming up this week?
So this week on the channel, I will be continuing my road to Creed 3. I have officially, because last week was my review for Rocky Balboa from 2006. So that means that I have officially reviewed all of the Rocky movies on my channel. Very proud of that. And then this week will be my review for Creed, directed by Ryan Coogler. He's done a thing or two or three. But this was before Black Panther. This was pre-Black Panther Ryan Coogler. It was in that weird middle ground between Fruitvale Station and Black Panther. Ryan Coogler has yet to miss, by the way. So It's going to be interesting to see Creed for the first time in forever. And my thoughts on that will be dropping this coming Monday. And then, of course, I'll be reviewing Ant-Man and Marlowe, of course. So if you have not checked me out, please do.
His channel's already linked in the description. You guys, make sure you go check it out. Give him a subscribe over there. I can't wait for you to revisit Creed. I love that movie so much. You're right. It's very early in Ryan Coogler's career, but like you said, he is just a fantastic filmmaker, so it doesn't even really matter. So that's awesome. Can't wait to hear your thoughts there. Guys, here on the Cheddar After channel tomorrow, if you're listening in the podcast feed today, Beyond the Clickers returns. We're recovering episode 5 of The Last of Us, titled Endure and Survive. That was an emotional one. It's going to be a fun conversation, though, so make sure you check that out with Brandon, Brat, and myself, assuming nothing goes wrong. On the Amateur Otaku, we are covering Tomo-chan is a Girl, and I think we're going to have to talk about Boruto, Naruto Next Generations, going on indefinite hiatus because that last episode was just that awful. Go subscribe to the Amateur Otaku. Subscribe here for the Chatter After so you don't miss a thing. And until next time, guys, keep watching movies. Peace.